This new premium tank isn't garbage, it's much worse, and I am looking at the brand new Vipera, and this tank is one of the most infuriating, one of the most boring, one of the most annoying, just absolutely horrendous premium tanks that you can actually get. From my own personal experience. Of course, this is my own personal experience. It is not necessarily what everyone is going to say. I'm sure there's people that will like this vehicle, but it definitely does not give me much inspiration for wanting to get the Italian tank destroyers on World of Tanks console. And why might that be? Well, the supposed really well armoured vehicle that is the Vipera, that is capable of bouncing so many rounds and capable of holding it down against some of the more overpowered vehicles within the game, being a power creep premium, doesn't work. And this tank is actually just another one of the very, very badly nerfed vehicles that Wargaming have essentially brought in to the game. And why is that? Well, this tank is reliant on having armor to make up for the fact that it loses out in many other areas, and for the fact that it does indeed have very lackluster damage per minute. It has a huge intra-clip reload, since it is a 5-shot autoloader capable of dealing, wow, 2000 damage, but it will take you an absolute eternity to be able to unload all of your shells, and it actually takes you 24 seconds to fully unload this clip, so 2000 damage over the course of 24 seconds. Yay! I bet you're all stoked at wanting to get this tank. Wow, 2000 damage at tier 8. Yeah, sounds pretty good. But I mean, you literally never get the opportunity to fully unload in this thing. I have tried so many times today, after getting back from work, trying to play this tank. And although there's been games where I think, oh, it's going pretty well, hopefully we'll be able to, you know, come away with a win, and then suddenly you just get taken out very quickly, and that is because the armor model of this tank is a little bit of a meme, and that is that frontally, if you are looking directly at the front of the Vipera, if you keep your armor exactly looking forward to the opponent, then yes, the armor is very, very good. As soon as you do this, the armor is absolutely trash, and that's because you can go through the side armor of this thing so easily. You've got these big plates on the left and the right hand side that we featured in the latest news video. You can see them in here. They're kind of on the hull armor. They're literally highlighted here on the left and the right. These are easy pens on the Vipera. And then, of course, you have terrible side of the turret armor, whereby if you get caught by like this, you are basically getting penned by absolutely everything. So armor wise, yes, it has very good frontal armor when you are literally looking directly at someone. But as soon as you give them any sort of side of the tank, which, you know, in a game where there are usually multiple opponents from multiple angles, it's not the case of, well, you must just keep all your armor towards one opponent. Well, no, that doesn't always happen in the game, and as soon as you do get caught out, given the fact that this tank doesn't have the most hit points, 1300, I mean, tier 7 heavy tanks have literally 250 more hit points than you, and the fact that this tank is one of the slowest, most disgusting vehicles, 34 kilometers an hour when using both of the speed boost equipments, and if you aren't using any of them, you essentially have a total speed of 30 kilometers an hour. So it is very, very slow, and it's made incredibly worse by the fact that this tank has an awful traverse speed of 19.8 degrees a second hull rotation, and even more annoyingly, 19.93 degrees a second turret rotation, and that is when using the speed boost equipment, which also improves that speed of the hull rotation by 10%. So yeah, I mean, if you actually want to try and hit someone that's not directly in front of you, you are going to take about 2 seconds to actually turn, and then to fully aim with this tank with its absolutely shocking aim time, 2.71 seconds to fully aim in this vehicle. And the actual stats of this when moving and when turning that turret are horrendous as well, so that you get a huge bloom, and you can't take vertical stabilizers on this thing since it's an autoloader, and that means that, yeah, essentially you got to keep whatever accuracy it is. The only way you can really make it a little bit better is by using ventilation and shell aiming or advanced gun lane drive, but AGL is probably one of the things that I would never usually take on a tank, since you just limit it in so many other ways, and I would much rather have more view range, etc. But in this tank I almost felt forced to use the speed boost just to make it that little bit more mobile, and little bit more mobile is basically not mobile at all. So yeah, this tank is horrendously annoying to play, and straight off the bat I'm going to tell you, in my personal opinion, to anyone that asks me should I buy this tank, instantly it is a no. But let's check out some of the gameplay where I can talk more about this tank, why it is so annoying. I'm going to be very honest with you, we have not got any amazing replays in this thing. This thing is a completely different vehicle to what we're used to in World of Tanks. I have tried my hardest. We've had games where the team just literally went in the most stupid places I've ever seen. We've had games where I was doing everything right, and then suddenly, you know, out of nowhere the artillery comes in and decides to ruin your day using going straight through that side armor, which is basically paper, along with all of the rest of the tanks in the game. I've had games where, you know, you're doing everything right frontally, and then suddenly someone comes from behind you, and then it's curtains, because you're never turning around in this thing, and you're certainly not going to be able to outtrade anything in the game. And in fact, some of the medium tanks at this tier are able to reload twice, and they don't have an autoloader or a big long reload, and they're basically outtrading you, even though you're actually firing every single time you're reloaded, or have that intraclip reload of 6 seconds. They're going to hit you maybe once, maybe 1.5 times roughly, for 240, 320, etc. And if you're playing in a tier 10 game, this tank is basically being outtraded by tier 10s, and the fact that this tank is using its autoloader and you're reloading and firing as soon as you possibly can. Yeah, I mean, this tank is just bad. It is bad. And hopefully Wargaming are going to look at this and think, maybe it does deserve some form of buff, just something to make it just a little bit decent. And I originally thought, you know what, it's going to be a very boring tank, and it is a very boring tank, I'm letting you know. But let's jump into this gameplay and we can see in action why I'm saying this. And of course, this is my own opinion, my own play within the tank. Of course, it wasn't excellent play by any standards, but I mean, it was very, very difficult to get this tank to work, even just a little bit. But let's jump in. So the first replay that we do have here is on canals. And yeah, we're going to try and deal at least a little bit of damage in this tier 10 game, where maybe we can at least pull out at least a fire for effect, you know, just trying to at least do something with this vehicle. And yes, I'm sure with enough time playing I can come out with a brilliant result, but it would be a lie if I was going to say, you know, on average you could deal 5,000 damage, or that this tank is actually good and that there are this tank could be chosen over a lot of the other tier 8 tank destroyers. I mean, a Scorpion G is basically reloading in almost the same time as this is taking to just unload that intraclip reload, and it's dealing an extra 90 damage per shell. Just feels like this tank kind of got shafted a little bit when it came to adding this one in, and yeah, I mean, it's just not a great one. But of course you're seeing me load the premium rounds, because although the penetration is okay on the standard rounds, 220, it's nothing outrageously good. I mean, in tier 10 games it's very difficult to pen things with 220 damage consistently, and when you don't have that many opportunities and when you really need to make the shots count, bouncing off of things in these sorts of matchups is just going to make your game 10 times worse. Now, you've seen here, it's taken a long time just to move forward in this tank. You can see here, even with all of the speed boost equipment, with everything that we can put in this tank, it goes up to about 25 on the flat, and of course then when you get that speed built up you can maybe maintain about 30, but as soon as you reach an incline the tank just drops off and you end up being able to go about 20 to 25 maximum when you do have just a slight incline. And you can see how long it's taking us just to build that speed back up, and this is a real problem because not only does it have the horrible speed, not only does this tank have the horrible dispersion when moving, not only does this tank have a horrible intricate reload for the amount of damage that it's dealing, and very similar to some of the actual vehicles in the game, but it has just this terrible gun arc as well. Although it has a turret, it is in name only, whereby essentially you have this kind of, I don't know, I want to say like a 90-degree spread. It might be slightly less, it might be just slightly more. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is a 90-degree spread, at least in total. So you can go 45 to the left, 45 to the right, and that means that if anyone gets around the side of you, you can't even move the turret to be able to get yourself in line with where they are. Once they get past that 45-degree mark, you are essentially relying on about 19 degrees a second to catch up to people, which is it's just never going to happen. I mean, yeah, 19 degrees a second. It will take you nearly 20 seconds to do a full rotation of this vehicle, and I would actually rather rub stinging nettles against my bare backside than actually decide to play enough games in this tank. It is genuinely horrible. Of course, using stinging nettles as toilet paper, I mean, it is just going to be better than playing this thing. And although we're having a few poor shots, although we're having a few misplays here, I mean, like, there's not a lot you can do in a tier 10 game when you are in this sort of tank, because the armor gets nullified even more so than when it is in a normal game. And that means that essentially you're going to get penned by a lot of these tier 10s who are loading premium, who can go straight through the upper plate. And of course you then have the problem of everything being a little bit faster, things being able to outspot you, and the view range of this tank not being amazing. And when you do have you know, the 360 view range I believe that this tank has, it just feels like this tank got nothing. I mean, it just feels like there's nothing. 2200 DPM when using a fully maxed out crew, when using ventilation to boost up DPM even more. 2200. It's horrendous. I mean, you're looking at tier 8 tanks like the Panzerjäger reaching 3500. You know, these tanks are literally better in almost every single way. They reload super quickly. They can almost hit twice for every time you can hit once on the intra-clip. They have essentially more damage if they can pen 2 shots. They can go 70 to, well, 65 to 70 kilometers an hour. They're cheaper to actually buy. This is a very expensive premium tank, even with the discount that we currently have in the game. Of course, if you want the base version, I think it's 25% off. It costs you about somewhere in the region of about 7,500 gold, which isn't necessarily terrible, but it's still not cheap. And there are certainly much better tanks I would recommend to a lot of people in the game than this one. Now, what I'm trying to decide in this game is, of course, what I do, because if I push, I'm going to get penned by the people on the hill. If I sit here, I'm going to get outflanked by someone. Of course, you're seeing me back up. I don't know where the enemy team are. I have no idea where this tanks that we're going into the town are going to be. We don't necessarily know what they are, where they're going, have they doubled back. And of course we don't have the mobility to kind of leave if we do find ourselves in a bit of a sausage sandwich, which makes it just a little bit less forgiving, even more than it already is. Yeah, I'm not calling for this tank to be buffed. I just want to really let you guys know that this tank is certainly not a powerful one. It is certainly not an overpowered one, and it actually makes a change to see this tank not just be broken like the majority of tanks in the game that they release as premiums. But I'm very much expecting Wargaming to be giving this tank some buffs in the future. Now, of course, we make a slight turn to try and hit the M46 who's behind us, and as soon as we do that, just to really give myself even more stinging nettles to rub that backside with, the artillery finishes off by landing a shell right on the top of the tank, which the armor on the top of the tank is garbage as well. So yeah, penned by artillery, it's a huge slug of a tank, it's huge, and yeah, trying to turn and just be agile and nimble and make plays across the entirety of the game, it doesn't happen in this tank. Now, there are some exceptions where this tank can be good, and I guess we can showcase a little bit of that in just a second. And I guess we'll look at this replay on El Haloof, because at least it gives you a little insight as to, you know, the armor can work when you do use it correctly, and I can show you how you can maximize it if you've accidentally made the option of purchasing this tank already. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this tank could be played well. I'm just trying to say it's not a competitive tank. It is definitely not going to be kind of making people rage off of the game. It's just one of those boring ones where essentially it's going to get hulled down somewhere. Your team are going to look at it and think, oh, it's a hull down Vipera that I can't pen unless I find the side of the turret. And then equally, you're going to also look at it as the player in the tank and think, oh, I've got to wait 24 seconds to deal 2000 damage, at which point I've probably missed a shell because the accuracy is useless, and of course the speed of the tank's terrible, so you can't even push in when people are retreating around a corner or something. And if you are actually capable of getting around a corner before they fully retreat, then the accuracy during that movement is awful as well. So yeah, I mean, the likelihood of you fully clipping out someone, it's just very minimal. And of course, with repair kits in the game and the fact that we have reusable consumables, trying to track someone and then keep them tracked, it's almost impossible, because they're going to repair their tracks, they're going to move out of the way. Now, this AMX 5100 is basically the saving grace in this game. Woohoo, we actually managed to find someone who sits in front of us only because it's an autoloader. Here you go, there's the first shell going straight into the side of the turret, as we see. Very powerful turret here, being able to bounce so many rounds when they're exactly in front of us, and of course managing to pick up a little bit of block damage. But yeah, maybe we push towards this Carnarvon, maybe we can do something, and basically we pick up 1600 damage. I mean, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like you're going to be able to do something. But now we're completely useless for 20 seconds, and the Eradicator, having more DPM than us as a heavy tank, having probably better armor for the most part in general, maybe not very much frontally, but at the same time it has a turret that can be very, very powerful, even if you do over angle or like you make a slight mistake. Slight mistakes in this tank just basically mean you get penned there. You saw a shell going into that flat plate. We gave a little bit of a turn of the turret to try and hit this Carnarvon, and we get a shot. Then the Vipera comes from behind us, and there you go. I mean, very, very dynamic, this sort of gameplay. It's just a case of go to one flank, hope the enemy team go there, hope your team come with you, hope that your team don't camp in the base when there are VK 1001p in the sniping area rather than going to the heavy tank line, and of course then decide to YOLO through the middle of the map in the VKP. I'm sure this guy is a very, very happy VKP player. He probably ended up with more damage than I did, maybe not. But of course, sitting at the top of the hill really worked out for him with his 410 damage. Not that I'm trying to like shame on anyone, but at the same time, it's just a case of if you don't get any team support, this tank you cannot carry with this tank. It just does not have that capability, unless of course you get very lucky and the opponents are just coming close to you. If they're just YOLOing you and you're on a ridgeline, you basically have to lose a game, but also be camping at the back to really make use of it, where you're farming up them as they kind of advance towards you, then reload, and then farm them up a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it's very rare that we showcase a 2000 damage game in this tank, but I think I played about 5 or 6 games in this thing, and it's more than enough to realise what this tank is about. And even if we could have got, you know, a 3k, 4k damage game, I just don't think for the average player it's anywhere near representative of what you're likely to be getting with this tank. And I just thought, in the kind of urgence of hoping that you guys don't go out of your way to spend money on this tank and put your hard-earned cash into a tank that is very bad, or you don't necessarily know 100% about it, yeah, I just thought it would be imperative to get a review out, and hopefully you'll see what I'm on about. And of course, if you see one of these things in the game, just remember, as soon as it turns its turret, go for the side of the turret or go for the hull armor. And if failing that, if you're in a heavy tank, just out traverse the Vipera, because it's never going to be able to turn to try and actually get any shots into you, because essentially you'll be able to out traverse it in a heavy tank, because yeah, fun. I'm sure there's players that have come out with 4, 5, 6, 7,000 damage in this thing, but I can guarantee you it's just a case of a very good player in a very bad tank that had a brilliant game. And of course that is not the kind of rule with this vehicle, but there you go, that's my opinion on this vehicle. Of course, maybe someone like Petty360, or maybe if Ricky Tikitave actually comes out with a review for this one, I don't know if he's going to, then maybe check out their reviews as well, because they might give a completely different opinion. Maybe it's overpowered for them, but for me, yeah, this tank is very non-meta. I don't think it's particularly great, and I don't really recommend ever spending your cash on this vehicle. But other than that, hopefully you did enjoy this video, or at least found it informative as to what this tank is all about and how to take it out, and effectively what to be careful of. Just don't sit exactly in front of it like the AMX 5100 and you'll probably beat this thing, is all I'm saying. And of course, in bottom tier matchups, this tank is horrendous. But there you go. Hopefully that was a good review, but of course let me know what you think about the Vipera. Did you pick it up? Let me know what you think, and of course hopefully I'll join you in the next video tomorrow, where we look at one of the new free vehicles that's part of an operation, which will be much funner than this tank, I can guarantee, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.